Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to think about that. And, I just watched my boyfriend, who's also a realtor, do his taxes from 2018
Yeah.
this past month. And he was stressed
Yep.
out. He's like trying to collect things from a year ago that he did, a year and a half ago. And I'm like, my bookkeeper, my accountant is the best money that I spend all year because I don't want to think about it. I don't want to have to think about it. So I agree with you. I mean, all the artificial intelligence in the world, I'd rather pick up the phone and say, hey, what's my password to this and how do I do it?
Welcome to the J. Wells CFO Show. I am your host, Jeremy Wells, and with me today is Nicole Garrity, a realtor up in New Hampshire. Really looking forward to hearing her story. She's with Keller Williams, huge brokerage. Really looking forward to hearing more about her operations up there and what her thoughts on Keller Williams and being a realtor and life in New Hampshire. So, Nicole, I'm going to turn it over to you. How's the weather up there in New Hampshire?
Oh, it's funny that you ask that. We just turned the clocks back recently, a couple weeks ago. And as soon as you do that, it's like property in the dark after 4 p.m. now, right? So when
Yeah.
people get out of work, you're showing property in the dark, pitch black. It's difficult. It's difficult. Once you get home, you don't want to leave the house. So it's hard to get people out there.
I hear you. I hear you. I've got a 2-year-old. So that keeping that sleep schedule on track during that time shift was, it went from one night I was putting her down at the same at her bedtime and it was bright as day outside, and then the next night it was pitch black outside. So
Oh yeah,
it's always interesting. Yeah.
it messes
Yeah.
with you, that's for sure.
So tell us about what you're doing up in New Hampshire.
So I'm a residential real estate broker. I'm an associate broker at Keller Williams Metropolitan, and that is the largest firm in New Hampshire. Right now, we hold the majority of the market share in New Hampshire. Primarily, southern New Hampshire is where I'm covering, but I do go right up into the Lakes region and show property up that way as well.
Good deal. Good deal. So tell us about, so you're affiliated with Keller Williams. Tell us about what attracted you to Keller Williams and why you chose that brokerage.
Yeah. So when I started in real estate 6 years ago, I started at Century 21, and it was a small mom and pop style brokerage. There were two brokers that I worked for, and one of them ended up getting terminally ill and passed away, and that significantly affected the other broker. So he wasn't really in the office much after that, and these were my first 2 years in real estate. So
Mm.
I quickly took over that office kind of as
Wow.
my own, really. And being a small mom and pop brokerage, anybody who walked in the door, if I was there, I got to work with them. So I really built my foundation at that Century 21, my clientele. And as I became their number one agent, I found myself feeling like I needed larger agents to look up to. I was totally against Keller Williams. I felt like they held all the market share and didn't necessarily put it out there as quickly as they should be. But I ended up at the Keller Williams that I didn't want to end up at, and I love it. It's a really great culture, and the fact that we have over 300 agents gives me that experienced agent to look up to and learn from everywhere in the
Good
office.
deal. Good
Yeah.
deal. No,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So eh, what were you doing before you said you've been a realtor for 6 years? What were you doing before that? And how did you get into real estate?
Yeah. Well, I went to the University of New Hampshire. I majored in psychology and women's studies, and I was
Wow.
bartending at the time that I graduated. So after graduation, I'm kind of looking at the job market, and with that type of degree, it really just put me into social work and social workers, because we need them, but they are grossly underpaid. So looking at those salaries of like 35 grand, 40 grand a year, and the type of work that you have to put into that career, I was like, I'm making that kind of money behind bar right now. Why would I do
Right.
that? Right. So I was
Right.
like, maybe I'll find something that I can kind of ease my way into. And the broker that ended up passing away, she was a regular at the bar that I worked at. And I was always fascinated by her. She'd come in with all of her friends and a couple of her work associates, and she mentioned to me, she's like, why don't you just go take the real estate class? So I did, and I took the exam. I'm a great test taker, so I passed it the first time, but people struggle with that test. I mean, I have friends who have taken it 3 or 4 times and haven't
Wow.
passed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I passed it right away, and I was like, you know what? You pushed me to do this. I'm going to come to your brokerage and learn from you. So I went to that Century 21 and started learning from her. And within 3 months, I was so couldn't bartend anymore. So I found myself like sneaking out into the walk-in, texting clients, trying to write offers in between, shaking martinis.
Yeah.
So I found myself overwhelmed with that pretty quickly. And I pulled myself out of the bartending world and just put myself full-fledged into real estate, took the leap.
That's interesting. I imagine there's some similar skill sets there, right? Because that sort of stereotypical bartender of you've got to find a way to connect to those patrons. You're trying to keep them happy constantly while they're just demanding more and more, and you got to keep a sense of their emotions, their attitude, make sure you're not upsetting them, but you're keeping them happy, and those kinds of things. So, and all the meanwhile trying to entertain them and keep a conversation going. That's kind of
small talk, covering that.
right.
I had a pretty big mental block against I convinced myself that, and I kind of twisted it so that I looked at real estate as being in the service industry. We're providing a service for these buyers and sellers to help them get through this process that they don't do every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Good deal. Well, that's awesome. That's a great connection that, it just turned into somebody that, you could have just said, well, this is just another customer for the bar. It doesn't do me any good, but you actually developed that into a relationship that has now launched you into a whole different career.
And I will say most of the patrons that I connected with at that bar, luckily it wasn't like a franchise TGI Fridays. It was
Right.
more of a local dive bar, let's say. But I made a
Right.
lot of friends through there, and I drove my business through those people and connections that I made at that bar. So
That's awesome.
even today, I'm still in touch with a lot of people that I met through that restaurant industry that are buying and selling property through me.
I definitely relate because, you're coming from that social sciences major background. I was a political science major, so I was probably just, a couple departments over from, wherever you would have been at your university, and ended up, going to grad school for that and teaching in that for 5 years before I realized this is good work, but it's not good money. And I'm trying to raise a family here. I'm trying to achieve something more, and that's going to take making a little bit more. And so found a career where I could still help people, like you said, where I was still there was still an educational component to it, and transitioned into a different field where now I've got a lot more control over my schedule as well as my income. So I think that's going to be a pretty consistent theme as we see a lot of people identifying these fields that they're just not worth it, and we desperately need those fields, people in those fields, but people also have to provide for themselves and their families at the same time. So I think that's a great story of how you said, I majored in this, I've got this job, but what can I do? What can I do that's more?
And don't get me wrong, I use that psychology degree on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, for sure. Good deal. So, when you were at this the Century 21 brokerage that you were with, and you saw that the owners weren't going to be able to keep running the day-to-day operations, what happened? How did you jump into that role of filling in the gap?
Yeah. So I just started showing up. I was there as often as I could be and answering the phones. So it's, believe it or not, 6 years ago in real estate, we were just starting to use online contracts and signatures and stuff like that.
Right.
So we still faxed a couple things back and forth, and
Yep.
it took a little while for that to catch up. So yeah, just being present, it was a lot of on the job learning,
Yeah.
honestly. I always had those two brokers to call and ask those questions to, but the other people that were in my office were part-timers. So I just took that desk and I ran it, struggles that I ran into, maybe not having all the support I needed. And that's kind of why I ended up at a bigger firm.
Yeah. But that's great that, I think that's one of those moments where you look back and you say, that's a moment where I could have just said, well, that's not my responsibility. Somebody else needs to fill in that gap, but you took the initiative and you jumped into that role, and, you've turned it into something.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Good deal. Good deal.
Exactly.
So what was the transition? How did you make that transition from one real estate company to another company, and how did that transition go, and how did that affect your business?
So that was a scary transition for me. I was very intimidated by Keller Williams going into it, because it is a bigger firm in the area. And like back then there was over 400 agents. So, I'm coming from being the biggest fish in the pond to being
Yep.
just me. So I actually asked another realtor that I had met at a separate Century 21 to join me at Keller Williams as the abode team. So we formed a team, and teams are really popular, I guess you could say, at the Keller Williams franchise, because they give you an opportunity to kind of create your own business within the brokerage. So I brought someone over with me, and we worked together for almost 2 years, and it just didn't work out. We ended up having a relationship to kind of put that aside. So I'm back to functioning as a sole agent, but I still represent myself as the abode team.
Gotcha.
Because, you consider the title companies, the inspectors, the lenders that you work with, those people are all part of your team.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
So, and I know from working with with other Keller Williams agents that there is that emphasis within the organization on the team, that you're not just an individual realtor out there trying to make it all work yourself, but that you are part of this team that is sort of a subset of your franchise within the Keller Williams structure. So, are you now that you're essentially running this team, it's a one person show. What's next? Where do you go from here with this team?
That's a great question. I am very much at a transitional point right now. I think I'd like to take my team and kind of estate consultant. And I do think that that's probably the route that the role of a realtor is going right now.
Mm.
'Cause the game's changing very rapidly, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different companies out there trying to cut out the realtor, right? So
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
um, we got Redfin out there, we got Amazon selling houses, Zillow's got
Yep.
the one
Yep.
click to
Zillow.
buy.
Yep. Yep.
So I think that, as much as they're trying to cut us out of the picture, people still need that one-to-one contact and that trust and that confidence in this purchase. Somebody to consult with and understand the market, understand what they're buying. So I think that maybe my team, it may become more of a consulting
Yeah.
type
Well,
structure.
and I can relate to that because within the accounting field, there is there's a big discussion, and for some even a concern over the role of automation, of artificial intelligence, of machine learning, right? And so, why would you pay somebody to do your bookkeeping for you when you can just train a computer program to do it and it'll take care of all of it for you, right? And why would you pay somebody to do your tax return when all the numbers just spit into the boxes that they're supposed to go into, and all of a sudden your tax return's done? And there's a concern that, before too long, we just won't need accountants anymore. But the response to that, right, is of course, like you're saying, and this is a very similar kind of story happening in real estate
Mhm.
right now, is you still need that human being. You still need somebody that can help you with the things that the computer can't just automatically do. So sure, the computer can move numbers from one box to another box, but it won't be there when you've got a problem. It won't be there when closing is about to fall apart. It won't be there when the IRS is coming after you because, they're auditing your last tax return. And so, there's still these situations where we are useful, and we have to start strategically thinking about making sure our clients understand that we're useful in these times where the software and the computers won't be there for you.
Exactly. I would say my accountant is probably my number one asset in real estate, because I don't want to think about, I don't even know what the word is. When you take all of your monthly
Your
things,
bookkeeping, right? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I don't want to think about that. And, I just watched my boyfriend, who's also a realtor, do his taxes from 2018
Yeah,
this past month. And he was stressed
yeah.
out. He's like trying to collect things from a year ago that he did, a year and a half ago. And I'm like, my bookkeeper, my accountant is the best money that I spend all year, because I don't want to think about it. I don't want to have to think about it. So I agree with you. I mean, all the artificial intelligence in the world, I'd rather pick up the phone and say, hey, what's my password to this and how do I do it?
And that's exactly the point, right? Is that, if I have a good realtor that is out there looking for properties that match what we're looking for, that is talking to, like you said, the transaction people, the title people, the mortgage people, and I know that they're handling those conversations and they're connecting the dots between all those different parts that have to work together, then that 30 days to closing, I'm not sitting there stressed out that 30 days trying to make sure it all works. I trust my realtor to make sure it works, in the same way that, a business owner is going to trust all year long that that accountant is handling those finances, handling that bookkeeping, handling that payroll. So when it comes tax time, it's not stressful. It's not, oh, I need these receipts from 12 months ago, 18 months ago that I can't find. And so, it's that added value that it might take 30 days to realize when you get to closing how important having that realtor was, right? It might take a year when it comes tax time to realize how important that accountant was. But when you get there, you're really happy they were there with you that whole time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that a lot of realtors and I'm guilty of, is not really letting the client know how much we are actually doing behind the scenes. So they might think
Yes,
we are
absolutely.
replaceable with that one click to buy, but who's interpreting those contracts for you? Do you really understand what you're signing? And, what are your next steps? Who's on top of you reminding you about those dates and those deadlines? If you're buying a house
Absolutely.
through Amazon, I don't know
Yeah.
who's helping you with that.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, uh, I and a lot of other accountants, we're constantly trying to figure out ways to, how do we educate clients and the public in general about the work we're doing, like you said, behind the scenes, without making it too technical, too complicated, I'm not trying to teach people accounting, I'm not trying to train accountants, but at the same time, I'm trying to inform them of what accounting is, right? So that they know what I'm doing for them. And I'm starting to see more and more realtors take that approach when it comes to, not just, sometimes I log into Facebook and I just see listings from realtors, and it's just, here are all the listings I have. And okay, that's fine, right? But if I'm looking for a house, I'm not going to go find your listing on Facebook. I'm going to ask you to find me, some houses that match my criteria. But, I see some that are actually putting some good content out there that helps me understand the value that they're adding in that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot, there's a lot to be said for that kind of work. And it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of extra time, but I think it's necessary. So, what is working with your clients look like, from your perspective? What are you doing to serve your clients and help them through their process?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of this has come from social media. People reach out to me through Facebook, through Instagram, and even Snapchat. I've done business through. They
Wow.
just feel,
Yeah.
yeah, they just feel safer reaching out through their phones, through social media. So from there, I'm either nurturing them to try and get that appointment, and it might take a little while until they're ready, but at least that line of communication is open now. You know, I'm happy when they reach out to me because I know that they feel safe reaching out to me, right? They trust me. So it usually starts there online behind the phone, and then we'll get a meeting. We'll start with buyers. Honestly, I am not doing a buyer consultation. That is, in my opinion, a waste of my time and a waste of their time. I'd rather discuss what you're looking for and meet you at the property, and we can learn on site about each other, about the property, about what you're looking for, if this is going to work for you and if it's not. For me, the buyer consultation type thing is more with the lender. I feel like that's more of a lender's role, where they're going to sit down and discuss, you know, how does the financing behind this work, right? So yeah, a lot of my work with the buyer clients is on the job, on site as we go. And then as far as a seller, a lot of times if I already know their property because I sold it to them, I might be able to give them a number right off the bat, right through my phone, say, this is about what I think your property would sell for. And I have past clients who contact me regularly and say, hey, what do you think my house would be worth in this market? Or what if we sold now? And, you know, I can kind of give them an idea, but of course I always do want to come through the property and let them know what they need to do to it to get it ready. So in New Hampshire, our market is kind of stuck right now, and it could be everywhere else, but we have those baby boomers who are stuck in their single family residences, and they're ready to move. They don't feel like they have anywhere to go. So with those clients, it's a matter of, you know, making them feel safe that we're going to find you somewhere to go, maybe even helping them find something before they put their house on the market, which is scary for them because they're like, well, we don't know how much we're going to get for our house. The market here is pretty stable and steady that we can give you a pretty good idea of what you're going to be able to walk away from your house with. So getting those baby boomers out of these properties so that the millennials can come in and start their families and buy these houses, it's huge.
That's interesting that you bring that up because, you know, I mean, there are headlines every day now about millennials can't find homes. Millennials aren't looking for homes. Millennials don't want to buy houses. They want tiny houses. They want, you know, they want urban apartments. They want all it, and all of these headlines and a lot of them conflicting about, you know, trying to figure out what millennials want in terms of real estate. Right. So from your perspective, you know, what is it? What is real estate going to look like over the next 10, 20 years now that millennials are starting to put together the kinds of incomes and assets that it takes to start moving into houses?
Yeah. Well, I do think that the smaller homes are definitely, it's a more competitive market. Anything at that 225 price point, anything under $250,000, if it's priced right, it's going to move very quickly because you have I mean, a 2-bedroom ranch, that could be the baby boomer coming from the big colonial that's trying to downsize. They're fighting for it. And so is that first time home buyer millennial. They're fighting for that 2-bedroom ranch also, you know, because they're a single mom and they don't want to have too much overhead, or they don't want to have to heat a huge house. So I do find that the smaller houses go much quicker. They are much more appealing to most people. So it's kind of frustrating with our new construction market because the builders haven't quite caught on to that yet. They're still building colonials. They're still building cookie cutter properties, whereas you could probably fit 3 reasonably sized properties on one parcel that you're putting a ridiculously large colonial on. And there's a bigger market for those smaller properties. So yeah, I do agree that I wouldn't say tiny homes. A tiny home is literally like a cubicle box, in my opinion, on some shared land, which New Hampshire is passing some legislation to make that more easily coordinated through allowing, you know, multiple properties on a single parcel now. Yeah, so New Hampshire's trying to get on board with that. We're not moving as quickly as we should, but yeah, the smaller properties are definitely a much more competitive. Condos are much more competitive as well, because you again have those baby boomers that are downsizing, that don't want to mow their lawn anymore, and then you have the millennials that are single parents and they don't want to mow lawn either. So those condos, they're eaten up like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you find, back to the builders and the developers, so if millennials are known for one thing, it's wanting everything custom, right? It's wanting everything done exactly the way they want it. Do you find that the developers and the builders are able to offer these new millennial buyers exactly the right home that isn't like anybody else's home, right? Or are they able to provide what millennials are looking for?
Well, unfortunately, I think that the people who are reaching out to builders to buy those new construction properties, they actually want those cookie cutter colonials. So
Really?
I
Okay.
think that there really is a market in this area for the type of innovative thinking builder who's willing to think outside the box and put something more creative together and offer a more interesting product rather than, I mean, we have plenty of builders who will throw up a
Yeah.
colonial in 60 days for you.
Hmm.
And there's people who will buy it too because they think that, that's what our parents strived for and that's what we want to strive for. And someday they're going to wake up and maybe not be happy with what they have.
The couple times that, I've gone to a developer showroom to just look around, just out of interest, really, is they'll have the big map up on the wall of the whole development and where the actual houses, the finished ones are, and then the in construction ones are, and then the open lots. And we'll start, my wife and I will start asking them about, okay, what if we wanted this floor plan? And they would say, well, we can only fit that floor plan on these two lots, right? These are the only two lots left. And it's like, well, that's not really the part of the neighborhood we were hoping for, but okay, we'll look at that. And then we'll look at the elevations, how it's going to look from the outside. And we'll be like, well, we like this elevation. And they'll say, well, you can't have that on those two lots because the two houses next to it already have that elevation. And then we'll say, well, okay, well, what about this color? And they'll say, well, those houses are already those colors, so you can't have that color. And I feel like we end up, either we would have to buy a house that isn't the house that we came in wanting to buy, or we were just going to not be able to live in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so I think and I understand that they want the community, the finished product, to look a certain way, right? But then there is this level of just, I'm spending a lot of money on this, and if I can spend $1,000 and get a piece of, a wardrobe that looks exactly the way I want it to, right? Then I ought to be able to spend, $200,000 on a house that is exactly the way I want it to finish, to look at the end. I don't know. I guess that's just my take on builders and the way they're setting up developments these days.
Yeah. So while we're on the topic of new
Yeah.
construction, I think that buyers get in over their heads when they start building a house. They don't realize that, base builder grade is base builder grade. If you want a walkway to your front door, we're upgrading. If you want
Yeah.
a staircase that opens up and just has a railing rather than a dark wall, that's an upgrade. If you want your driveway page, that's an upgrade. Yeah. Like, people aren't, when they go into it, they don't realize the cost that this new construction project is going to take them to. Even the work that they're going to have to put in themselves, designing it and choosing it and staying on top of the builder about it. It's a lot of work. I tend to steer my buyers away from new construction because, once you're in that property, sure, now you need blinds. These things that, if you buy something that's slightly used, like buying a car that just has a couple thousand miles on it, just freshly driven off the lot, it's going to have those things for you. The blinds will be in place and things that people don't think about, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah. Another thing is, when it comes to those, like you're saying, is that you'll see the billboard on the highway that'll say, starting at a certain price, and then you actually show up, and it's automatically 50,000, 100,000 more than that once you actually get the house that's anywhere close to what you would actually want to live in, right? Because they might have some base model at that price, but nobody's buying that base model the way it comes, the way it was
Exactly.
designed. Yeah. Yeah. So I think obviously, there are parts of this country and I'm close to one being near Jacksonville where we need more houses. We've got a shortage. We need more. There's more people coming in. There's demand. But at the same time, if you look at the listings, there are a lot of existing homes for sale too. Right. And so, I think there's a good balance there between, more homes for people that need them, but then also using the stock that's available as well. So,
Yeah.
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 So good deal. Good deal. Well, if somebody, around you in New Hampshire or up in New England is looking to get into real estate or, wanting to, or really anywhere in the country, I guess, is wanting to get into real estate, thinking about becoming a realtor, what would be your recommendation? How should they get started on that? What's the first thing they should do?
Well, you got to take the 40-hour class, which, the cost to become a realtor, I do believe, should be a little higher so that we don't necessarily have as many,
Okay.
part-time realtors who think that it's just a way to make an easy buck. That's hurting our industry right now. And even as a realtor myself, when I get that, if I'm a listing agent, when I get that buyer's agent on the other side who's a part-time realtor, I'm like, oh boy, buckle up. Here we go. Like, we got somebody who does not know how this is going to work. They're probably
Interesting.
going to blow up the deal,
Hmm.
So if this is something that you want to do seriously, I would highly suggest taking the real estate course. There's a company, Kathy Russo School of Real Estate. She's wonderful. She'll teach you how to pass the exam. And as many of us know, the exam itself has nothing to do with actually what we're doing on the ground. So just pass
I
that
think that's
exam.
any profession out there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just about any profession.
Just pass that exam and then partner up with an agent who's willing to let you shadow them. You're
Hmm.
going to be stuck doing that grunt work for a little while. Do open houses. Open houses are very lucrative where I'm from. As long as somebody shows up, you're pretty much guaranteed to walk away with a couple new contacts or getting your face out there. You're learning how to interact with people and walk people through a property and present it properly. So open houses will be a great way for people to really break into the business. Many offices offer phone time, or we call it uptime, where you can take hold of the front desk and anybody who calls the office that's looking for information on a property, as long as your office doesn't force you to give it to the exact listing agent, then you can start a conversation with that
Hmm.
prospect and start trying to convert them to a buyer of your own. Yeah, and shadowing another agent, just go to showings with them. I remember when I first started in this industry, I was terrified to start showing property. I didn't even know how to schedule a showing, and
Hmm.
my broker showed me how to schedule showings and how do I open a lockbox, so that if you're following an agent who's doing this regularly, then you don't look silly on the spot trying to fumble with that lockbox in front of the future client. So yeah, shadowing is going to be a huge way of getting to know the market around here. And a lot of agents will let you shadow them because they have stuff, they get those phone calls from those buyers that they don't really want to pursue. So for a small
Right.
referral fee, we can pass them off to somebody who will take good care of them.
And you are not the first realtor that has told me and come onto the show and said talked about the value of open houses. And so that's definitely my wife and I, we have learned a lot about not just a property for sale, but the entire neighborhood that it's in by going to open houses. So I know from the consumer side of things that an open house is valuable in that you just learn a lot. You might not be specifically interested in that property, but you might be interested in that neighborhood, and the person that's sitting there explaining to you about the neighborhood, about the HOA fees, about the property taxes, about what's
Mhm.
also available in that neighborhood, the probability, if they can have that conversation with you, the probability of you choosing to keep working with that person is really high at that point. So
Yeah,
it can be good on it for both sides, those open houses.
market knowledge is huge to collect as you're going through open houses. And even a way to get as an agent, sometimes when I'm walking through properties with my buyers, we'll hit that open house time so that we can see like how much interest there is in this property. You know, who are the other buyers that are competing with us in this market? You know, if you're looking at properties from $325,000 and there's only 4 of them in the north end of Manchester on the market, and you go to all of them, you're going to run into the other buyers that are putting in offers on the
Right.
same properties as you know? So that makes a difference too, knowing who you're competing with for these properties.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I hadn't even thought about it from the sort of competitive side, but that's a good point too. You know, it is, you know, again, on the consumer side, knowing who else is out there looking at the same thing that you're looking at, and you know what it might take in order to get a deal to closing. For
Mm-hmm.
sure. No, that and again, like I said, you know, finding those people, you know, finding those agents, working those open houses that you click with, you know, and almost seeing that as an opportunity to vet or to interview, you know, a few different realtors, you know, and just go take a Saturday and just do it, you know, just drive around to a couple different open houses and meet a few different realtors, learn about those neighborhoods. And you know, if nothing clicks that day, well, then just, you know, the next Saturday, do it again, you know,
Yeah.
and go have a nice lunch and enjoy the day.
Yeah, exactly. I had a
Yeah.
great couple come through an open house for me this year, and I followed up with them. I gave them some little tidbits of information and they went on about their day. And I'm never one to really pressure someone to work with me. If they reach out to me, that's great. And I will let them know that I'm available. But this couple actually said to me, they reached out to me a week later and they're like, to see if you're taking new clients right now and you'd be willing to work with us. And I'm like, of course I'm taking new clients. Like I just found that to be such a respectful way to ask to work with someone, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, good deal. Nicole, thank you so much. If people are interested in maybe moving to New Hampshire or finding a house in New Hampshire or just want to get in touch to ask you about real estate, maybe getting into that business, what's the best way for people to contact you?
I'm very available through social media. My Instagram handle is at abodeteam.com. Well, no, just at abodeteam for my Instagram handle. And then Facebook, it's Facebook.com/abodeteam realtor
Good
on
deal. Good
Facebook.
deal.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. We'll have links to that down in the show notes in the description. Nicole, again, thank you so much for being here. To all the listeners and viewers, thank you so much. Be sure to check out the show notes in the description. I am Jeremy Wells. You can find me across all the social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, at JWellsCFO. Nicole, once again, thank you very much. Everybody, have a good day.